Hello and welcome to another InRetrospect RAW, the show where we have 20 minutes to debate what things to do with a video game will make a top 5 list concerning that video game. That's what we do. Hello, I'm Peter Willington and I'll be your host, filling in for Sam Turner. Dan Frost joins me on my left.
Hello.
And on my right is Kris Darby.
Right hand man, hello.
Right man, Kris Darby, yeah. What we're doing with this episode is we're going to be taking 20 minutes to define our top 5 games which need a sequel, but have so far not got one. Behind the scenes, we put together a list of 12. Then we struck 2 of them off because we said, no, we don't want those 2. We got it to 10, and we are going to debate which of those 10 should become our crystallized 5. And we'll give you the official, in retrospect, verdict of what the 5 games that need a sequel are. Confused? I always am. So let's continue within retrospect raw. So 20 minutes, just 20 minutes to talk about these. I'm going to start the timer after I have run through the 10 games that have made our list so far, and those games are 13 Shadow of the Colossus, Jamalami, Prince of Persia 2008 timeline, Capcom vs SNK 2, Vin Diesel Wheelman, Shenmue 2, guess who put that in, Oddworld, Stranglehold, and Bugs Bunny Lost in Time. A definitive list, I'm sure you'll agree, listener. Let's start the timer to count down 20 minutes. Bosh. That Bosh means that we're now going. So, I'm going to start off with Sam's, first of all, one of them anyway. That's Shadow of the Colossus. So there is no sequel at the moment to Shadow of the Colossus. The nearest that we've got is a game called Last Guardian, and that is in development hell. It was announced at the beginning of the PlayStation 3, and it shows no sign of being released. Shadow of the Colossus is a classic, of course. It's a critically acclaimed darling, I suppose. Straight out of Japan, got a beautiful sense of sadness to it, in which you fight giants, I suppose, giants, and you try and topple them in a quest to save your girlfriend. I think, sort of, maybe.
Can you imagine if this was the opening narration to the game?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know why I wasn't picked. Kris, is this a game that you want a sequel to?
Well, putting on my Digital Wonderlist cap on, I think I love about Shadow of the Colossus is that the actual giant themselves is the level.
Sure.
I mean, it's a level. How many levels do you play in a game that actually the level itself is walking and moving and living?
2, and they're both at the opposite end of the spectrum. You've got the brainy, clever Shadow of the Colossus and the dumb as dirt God of War 3.
Well, actually, would Vibrim count as well? Because that's a constantly moving.
It's not a character, is it?
No, I suppose not. Well, it depends on your definition. But yeah, well, yeah, but for that reason alone, and that other game isn't in our list, Shadow of the Colossus, I think it's such a unique and iconic game that it really does demand a sequel, I think.
Absolutely. Dan, you're all about your art games. Shadow of the Colossus. Sequel, yay or nay?
I'm not a huge fan of Shadow Colossus, and that's probably just because I've probably had, of all of us, the least kind of access to it. However, I think for what it is, and it is, as you say, it is an iconic game, and it is massive in every sense of the word. It feels like a game that does deserve a sequel, and we need to just see how far we can go. Obviously, that hasn't happened with the PS3. That's not going to happen to PS3. Who knows if we'll get anything going forward. The only question I would have about putting it in the top 5 is this is a a list of games that need a sequel, that should have a sequel. Technically, this might already have a sequel in Last Guardian. It just hasn't been released yet. That would be my only qualm with putting in our list.
Good use of the word qualm, and also you'd be wrong. I haven't played Shadow of the Colossus, but I think this is going into the top 5 list anyway because I'm selfless, and there are literally a billion people, I imagine, that want a sequel to this, and who am I to stand in their way? So I'm going to just chuck that straight in. Good work, Sam. You're not even here, and you've got a game in. Let's come to you and Oddworld. Isn't there a sequel in the works, or is that a reboot? And are we defining them as two separate things?
For those who maybe aren't kind of au fait with the Oddworld series began as a quintology of 5 games, and that was the idea. They would create the universe of Oddworld and then 5 games within that. The first of those games was Abe's Odyssey. Mm-hmm. That was followed by Abe's Exodus, which wasn't part of the 5. That was a bonus game attached onto that. After that came Munch's Odyssey, which I think was part of the 5, but I'm not 100% on that. And then the 4th game has been Stranger's Wrath, which was part of that quintology. It's a game that's built an entire world and really, really interesting and fun characters. And the world that they live in is really interesting. And I think for the world that's been created and the characters, people like Stranger, people like Munch and Abe, these are fantastic, fantastic characters. And this world deserves to be expanded on more, and for these characters to take their journeys even further. And so that's what I think the Oddworld series needs a sequel, because that quintology of 5 games needs to be completed. At the moment, we only have 2, possibly 3, because I'm not 100% on Munch's Odyssey, whether that was kind of in the quintology. That's why this needs a sequel. We do have Oddworld New and Tasty coming out, but what that is, that's a reboot. That's not necessarily a reboot, but a HD version of Abe's Odyssey, which looks very, very nice, and I probably will buy it when it comes out. But that's not part of the original series of the quintology that was always there. I think this is another early entry to our top 5 list, Dan. I think you've done well. Have I sold it to you?
I think you have, because I think the Oddworld games are fine, and I'm sure we'll talk about them at length at another point down the line. But I'm also somebody who quite likes things to be finished, right? And the fact that they've set it up as a quintology, this needs a sequel. Literally needs a sequel, because it has to have a sequel to be the quintology. And at the moment, things feel just too open. For my own tastes. So I want to chuck that straight in. Kris, have you got any reservations?
I thought that the prerequisite for our selection was that it would be a single game in a series that never had spawned any sequels whatsoever. And the fact that we've already got games in the series makes me slightly reticent about it. Although it is quite an unusual situation where you've committed to this 5-game, I suppose, contract with your audience, and you haven't finished it yet. So, I mean, Dan, I'm going to bow down to your expertise here. Is it a game that demands a sequel, or is it merely just it's expecting one? Because if we're expecting a sequel, is there a good chance it's going to happen anyway?
Good question.
I think at some point, I think it might happen. I think depending on how well New and Tasty sells, that will kind of have a big influence. I think, in a different way to maybe Shadow of the Colossus, people demand more of Shadow of the Colossus. They want to see where that individual story goes further. Whereas with Oddworld, the series it's a difficult one, because you say it demands a sequel. I can't see them going any further in the quintology of Stranger or Munch or Abe. It will be a brand new character, and so it's the series overall that requires a sequel. It's not like a game, we need to take that character further, so we have a sequel. The actual whole series needs to be expanded and completed. That's why this one demands a sequel. Okay. It needs to be complete.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make an executive decision here. That's going straight in. Now, Dan, of course, there is another game on this list, as you know, that a lot of people are demanding a sequel to. And, of course, that's Kris's choice of Bugs Bunny Lost in Time. Kris, talk to me about Bugs Bunny in the knowledge, of course, that you have we're 7.5 minutes into this.
I don't know if I need to say anything really. I think
sure.
I mean,
I don't think you do either.
It's Warner Brothers telling H.G. Wells' classic story.
Right.
It's one of those rare games, I kid you not, and there's probably like a very small amount of our listenership who actually have played this game, but it's an absolute gem for the PlayStation. It's one of those ridiculously sounding games where you imagine it's just being created by 12 bored people in an office somewhere just to sell a product, a brand, but actually it's by a gaming company that's got a soft spot in my heart, and that's Infogrames. And basically, yes, but Bugs Bunny, he gets a time machine, he gets lost in time, as the title says, and you have to work your way through different worlds, and each world is kind of framed within an actual cartoon that actually existed. So you feel as if you're playing that cartoon as well. But there are real clever kind of overlaps. You can't just complete a world. You have to go back and forth between different worlds, and you get different skill sets from that. And it's a really nice and very well meticulously constructed kind of through line. I'm not really selling this, am I, to you?
No, I'm.
At the end of the day, it's still Bugs Bunny.
Not.
Time machine.
Yeah, not at all.
But,
I'm not.
Honestly, listener, go on
interested
YouTube, do yourself a favor, type it in, and just be amazed by it.
Okay.
I certainly am, and it's nostalgic.
I agree.
I don't even know if we need to discuss anymore because you're both clearly not convinced. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm gonna make a very controversial decision now that we've not actually done in Raw at all since we've begun it. Now, I don't know if this deserves some sharp intake of breath or anything, but I want to swap one of my proposed things for a game that I've just come up with.
Okay.
Well, not the actual game, but the idea for it being in this list.
Are you swapping out Stranglehold?
I'm swapping out Stranglehold, a game that me and Sam hold very dear to
and
our
me.
hearts.
And me.
And you, Peter. Yep. I'm going to put in there Tomb Raider 2013. Current timeline, Tomb Raider 2013.
Okay, quickly, pitch me this.
Tomb Raider. A kind of a moot subject. Tomb Raider again being revamped, and people were very anxious and apprehensive about this happening. Delayed its release, but I don't know about you, but I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of a breath of fresh air into that universe. It really needed to have it happen to it, and it wasn't just a simple Uncharted clone. It actually had something else behind it as well that was very distinct and very unique. And for me, that's why I think it demands a sequel. Dan, I actually want to play more.
Now, Dan, I'm shocked at this behaviour from Kris. Tomb Raider 2. Tomb Raider 2? I guess it would be Tomb Raider 2. Is that needed?
I think, Kris, you'd have been better off sticking with Stranglehold.
Agreed.
Seriously. Okay.
Yeah,
the reason I said this is because Stranglehold is a game that probably not going to get a sequel, and yet it does deserve a sequel. Whereas I would put all the money I have on in a couple of years' time just being able to play another Tomb Raider.
Then we've got an Oddworld thing happening.
Well,
a universe.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. Well, you know what?
I feel like I'm playing chess and I've made my move and I want
Chris,
to
I think
do it.
absolutely.
My hands off my piece.
Checkmate, basically. So I'm afraid you've sort of messed that one up, and I must penalise you for it by moving straight on into some of my choices. Here we go. Now, Vin Diesel, Wheelman.
Dan, do you want to take this?
Well, it's Vin Diesel. He drives around.
Yep.
He does a lot of very, very cool things.
Very cool.
I can't get enough of Vin Diesel doing lots of really cool things.
Neither can I. Now, any game.
Have you seen Riddick?
True, but any game in which a car can fight other cars is all right by me. 1, fight as Megamix.
Other than Transformers.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. 1, fight as Megamix. 2, the Transformers games. 3, Vin Diesel, Wheelman. Now, there is no way that this is ever getting a sequel because Vin Diesel is a lunatic and was spending just too much money trying to make this game. Genuinely, you go back now and you look at Midway pouring the amount of money that they did into Wheelman. It's crazy, but it's a brilliant, completely ludicrous video game that is sort of not a progenitor to, but a sort of sideways offshoot of what Saints Row was kind of doing around Saints Row 2 time, but with a bit more of a straight face. I love Vin Diesel, Wheelman, in exactly the same way that I love 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. And I feel like it deserves a sequel so much just for its sheer audacity.
I don't think you can. I can't argue. It's what I like about it, and why I think it would go in the list is the fact that we know it's never going to get its own sequel, and so this is the only way it could ever kind of get close to that through our podcast.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Now I'm gonna, with just 7 minutes remaining, I'm gonna quickly make my arguments for the other two games. One of which I know is going to be shot down immediately. Capcom vs SNK 2 is the best fighting game ever made. It has like 60 characters in it. It's made by Capcom with the help of SNK, who made Street Fighter and King of Fighters respectively. It's the most balanced, intense fighting game I've ever played. I put about 200 or 300 hours into it, and there was a sort of sequel by SNK called SNK vs Capcom SBC Chaos Clash. But
that's a snappy title.
It certainly is. It's why it sold so incredibly well. But it was made by SNK, and it was not the same game because Capcom has just a way of making fighting games. I would love Capcom vs SNK 3, but I know that neither of you two give a monkeys about it, so I'm going to skip right over that and go to Prince of Persia, the sequel to the 2008 timeline. This is the one where Nathan Drake puts on a headscarf and jumps upside down on some cel-shaded walls. It's a very, very easy game. It's got all the time shifting mechanics from the previous titles. It was kind of 7 or 8 out of 10 at the time, but I always really loved it. I love the relationship between the Prince and Elika. I think Elika's a really great character. They were always saying how the Prince of Persia games were sort of split off from one another from that point onwards, so there is the potential of them doing a sequel, but they just haven't done it, and it's been 5 years, and I'm really upset that they haven't, and I genuinely feel like there's a shot of this making our list. Kris, Dan, one word. Does it go in?
No. You wanted one word, and that's in one word. That's the only way I can really kind of demonstrate my not wanting to put it in. It's a game that's already had so many. I know this is a 2008 timeline, but the fact that you have to designate which timeline you want the sequel from tells me it's had too many sequels.
I'm upset. Kris?
Maybe. That's my one word.
Okay.
But Capcom versus SNK 2, it's got a 2 after it, Pete.
I know. That's why I want the 3. Or 2.5. I don't care.
This is a sequel.
CVS 2 HD. That'll do it. That'll do it for me. All right. Do you know what? We've got 4.5 minutes.
What have we got so far then?
So far we've got Shadow of the Colossus, we've got Oddworld, and we've got Vin Diesel Wheelman. There are a couple more games that I need to quickly run through. One is Jamalami, and this is one of Sam's choices. This is a sequel, a spin-off, I suppose, to Parappa the Rapper. Personally, I love Parappa the Rapper. I don't feel Jamalami is worthy of a sequel in itself, and technically there sort of is a sequel that Sam failed to mention. That is the upgraded arcade version that was only released in Japan. So unless there's any fondness from you two, I don't think it should go in.
Well, I think Sam would probably argue the point if he was here, but as he hasn't bothered to show up, then he doesn't get to say that. So I'm going to say no. I
agree with you.
I'm going to say no as well.
13. It's the cel-shaded shooter from Ubisoft based on a French comic. I loved the original, and there was talk that there was going to be a sequel, but it got canned. I think anything to change the first-person shooter is a good thing. I think, personally, that this one deserves to go in. Kris, there is 3.5 minutes remaining on the clock. 13. Is it worth doing 13-2?
I agree. Yes, I think so. Just because it is a very pretty-looking game.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very distinctive. It's got a very distinctive mise en scène for an FPS. So yes, definitely, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Dan, did you play 13?
Not really. So I don't feel like I can properly say my feelings on this. So I will bow down to your superior knowledge.
Okay.
But there's before we run out of time, because I know we're running out of time. There's one game left on our list that if it's not in our top 5, I will literally leave this podcast now.
This is why we're running out of time, getting right to the end. We've only got 2 minutes 45 seconds. This is why I left this one to last, because I feel like this is a complete no-brainer. I personally don't give a monkeys about this series, but Shenmue 2 was such a bad place to leave that series, and the outcry for a third one is at the same level as a Half-Life 3 and a Shadow of the Colossus.
I would say even more so. For people who don't know the series is about a character called Ryo Hazuki, whose father is murdered by the evil Lan Di. He then chases Lan Di across Hong Kong, I think it is, towards the second game, trying to work out all the background, the history between his father, who his father really was. So much kind of mythology behind it. When it was first made, I've got to speak quickly because I know we're running out of time. When it was first made, it was thought of as like this giant opus that was made for the Dreamcast. It was going to be the biggest game that had ever been made. Mm-hmm. Shenmue 1 came out, it was relatively successful, even though it's quite a niche game. Shenmue 2 came out, very much similar game, quite a niche game, and so did okay. Towards the game is then left, where they leave the game, there's no spoilers really, but it's left in a way that basically the entire idea of the whole game and where it's going changes, and it becomes a lot different. And that's where they've left it. There's been countless thoughts that it's going to come out, it's not going to come out, it's there, it's not, there's been a Kickstarter, blah, 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 blah. It's not happened. It needs to happen just for the resolution. I don't care what the resolution is. It could be awful. I just need that resolution.
I agree with you. I think that's going on the list. With a minute remaining, Kris, any objections on Shenmue 3 being the sequel that we want?
Well, other than the same objection I've had to some of the games we've had in this list, it's Shenmue 2. It's had a sequel. I know, Dan, you desire closure, but you've picked Oddworld as well, and
would you be happy
Dan,
to...
you're gonna have to choose between your children here, Dan. Do you want closure in Oddworld or do you want closure in Shenmue?
Hey, whoa. Some games require the extra sequels in order to complete them. You can't say just because it's had one sequel, it's not allowed another.
You're the kind of person who doesn't like an open ending.
You can't say if it was a film, if it was Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings film, which I know you love, if they left it at the Two Towers, you can't say it doesn't deserve a sequel because the story hasn't finished, and the story in Oddworld and in Shenmue 2 hasn't finished.
I agree with you. I think it makes the list. That means that our list is, in no particular order, 13, Shadow of the Colossus, Vin Diesel Wheelman, Oddworld, and Shenmue 2.
Not even Bugs Bunny didn't even get a look in, did he?
Let this beautiful harp calm your stresses, Kris. Listener, that's our top 5. What a classic top 5.
Serendipitous. Yeah.
I would have added Mirror's Edge 2, but thank the Lord Jesus Christ, there is a sequel on its way. So that's our list. That's our top 5. I think we've done quite well. Some people have got more games in than others. I certainly have got barely any in, but that's fine. And yeah, I think the list of 13, Shadow of the Colossus, Vin Diesel, Wheelman, Shenmue 2, and Oddworld is pretty respectable. Dan Frost, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your spirited Shenmue argument.
My pleasure.
Chris Darby. Some bitter defeats there. But then some schoolboy errors as well.
I'm going to have to apologise to Sam now because I don't think he's going to be happy that I took out Stranglehold.
I don't think he's going to be happy. I'm not happy, to be perfectly honest. But thank you both for joining me, listener. Thank you. You're the fourth wheel on our amazing truck that is in retrospect
driven by Vin Diesel.
Driven by Vin Diesel, fighting with other cars, so yeah. I mean, it's been really good that you listen to it, because otherwise it's just us talking into microphones. You want to visit InRetrospectPodcast.com, where you can find all of our great podcasts and all the shenanigans that go on. There's a whole bunch of special series. Did you check out the Naughty Dog one? Did you check out the Tomb Raider one? Did you check out the Rockstar one? Did you check out the Metal Gear Solid one? Well, if you didn't check out one of those, you should absolutely go and check them out, because they are amazing. if you want some of the best video game related tweets, then you want to follow at InRetroSpect. That's the InRetroSpect gremlin. He's always friendly. He's always kind. He's always really lovely about us. And on Facebook, if you're a Facebook user, you can go to the search bar, type in InRetroSpect, and you'll find the podcast comes up. What you want to do is you want to hit like on that page. Look at all of the lovely art and the brilliant layout of it. It looks absolutely amazing. And you'll never, if you follow us on Twitter or on Facebook, you'll never miss another show. But an even better way of doing that is subscribing to us on either iTunes, if you're an Apple fan, or on Stitcher Smart Radio, if you have an Android device, or indeed any other device that doesn't have an Apple logo slapped all over it. And you can also rate and review us there as well, which is a thing that we enjoy you doing. So please do it. Tell a friend about us, obviously, because word of mouth is how we spread information about our shows. So do that if you like what we're doing. If you don't, keep it to yourself. Yeah, all right, good. Anything else I need to plug? I don't think there is. Oh yes, of course there is. YouTube.com/InRetrospectPodcast. That is a URL for our YouTube channel. And you can go there and you can subscribe to us and you'll find all sorts of video content. It's pretty brilliant, actually. I'm subscribed. Why aren't you? And I think that is about it. Thank you for joining us for another Raw. We will talk to you all very soon. Yeah, goodbye. Bye. Goodbye. Goodbye.